Hello all, and welcome back to Midnite Movie Reviews. I am Vincent,
I'm Raven.
and we've got a very special episode tonight. We are reviewing the entire career,
Filmography.
of Quentin Tarantino. Now we're just focusing on the films that he wrote and directed.
Right.
His 9 films.
The 9 so far.
Yeah. He's come out, said multiple times that he wants to make 10 films and call it a day. Because pretty much he feels that after 10, most directors
Get a little bit rusty.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want that to happen to him, which is understandable. I mean, 10 films is already a pretty solid body of work, really. And by the way, we're playing by Tarantino rules. We are aware that Kill Bill is technically 2 different movies, but we're counting it as one because he counts it as one. So that's the rules we're playing by.
Yeah, and like I said, we're not doing anything that he just directed or just wrote. And you could technically say that Jackie Brown, he didn't technically write, but he wrote the screenplay for it. That counts.
Right.
So, and that is considered one of the Tarantino 9 so far. And now, interestingly enough, here recently, Quentin Tarantino has actually said he is considered not even making the 10th film.
I had not heard that.
Yeah, he said that, most directors' last film is garbage. So he's like, I'm happy with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I might just go to writing plays from now on or something.
He's thinking too much. We need that 10th movie.
Yeah.
I was telling him earlier, I really hope the last movie is a horror movie. Now, Tarantino's produced some horror movies, but we've never seen a horror movie made in the Tarantino style with all the Tarantino tropes. So I think that would be really interesting because he's admitted he's a fan of horror films. So seeing him do an all-out horror movie would be just, I feel like that would be an experience.
I feel like it's going to have to be, involve some serial killer who cuts off women's feet.
Yeah.
And there's a big Mexican standoff at the end.
Speaking of the tropes, yeah.
And as he opens a trunk, we see a shot from inside the trunk where there's all these feet in there.
Yeah. If Tarantino ever sees this, you've got your idea for your 10th movie right there.
So
just throw us a little bit of that. We'll be fine.
We gave you that inspiration.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I guess getting right into this, what we're going to do, we're just going to give a brief little overview on each movie. We are going to go on the assumption.
Spoiler warning now, like, a lot of these movies have been out for a long time. Tarantino's a big name. We assume that anybody watching this has probably seen all these movies before, so we're going to treat it like you have.
Yeah, so we're not going to give any light reviews, and we're really not going to review any movie. We're just, kind of recap each one, just give a brief little, touch and base on each one before we get to our personal ranking system here at the end. Now, again, this is just 2 random guys' personal rankings. These are not, we're not really judging these on any, major criteria. This is not like the American Film Institute going through.
Right, and we're not saying, I mean, to get it out there, I mean, we'll probably say this again when we get to our rankings, but we think all of these movies are good.
Yes.
We think they're all good. There's not a bad one in the batch, and we're not trying to say that one movie is a better movie than the other. We all love them all. We're just going to rank them based on just our personal enjoyment of them. Yeah.
We're both huge Tarantino fans. This is something I've wanted to do for a very long time, and we have this discussion a lot, just in random conversations. Yeah, and of course, every time he'd put out a new movie, we'd have to re-rank every movie so far.
I typically do that whenever there's a new movie coming out of his. I'll normally go back and watch all the ones up until that point, just to kind of get myself in the mood before I go in the theater.
Now, it's something kind of funny, though, before we get into this. So this is Raven's here, his Tarantino
Blu-ray Box Set.
Yeah, the 20 years of filmmaking. I remember when he bought this back in 2014 or 13.
Something like that sounds right.
Yeah. And
I think Inglourious Basterds was the newest one at the time, so it doesn't include. Well, that's when I bought it, but it was released a little bit before that because it doesn't have Django, it doesn't have Hateful Eight, naturally it doesn't have Once Upon a Time, but it has everything up until Inglourious Basterds, and it also includes True Romance, which he wrote, but again didn't direct, so
yeah, and
we're staying away from that.
See, that was kind of my issue with this box set. It's like, okay, there was still more stuff because, what was his affiliation to Natural Born Killers?
He wrote it.
He wrote it,
but he doesn't like it.
Yeah,
which I would imagine is probably why it has nothing to do with this box set. And then you could even say, From Dusk Till Dawn, he co-wrote with Robert Rodriguez and co-starred in. So
he was a guest director on Sin City, and which that's another movie I'd really like to talk about one day, just because there is, we'll get into this here in a bit, something about one of Tarantino's movies that I feel Sin City is more of a Tarantino movie than this one in particular. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and get right into the first Tarantino movie, which was, of course, Reservoir Dogs. Yeah, so Reservoir Dogs, Tarantino's first film that he wrote, and his first feature-length film that he wrote and directed, came out in 1992. And now this was not my introduction to Quentin Tarantino. I always say, Pulp Fiction was my introduction to him, but Reservoir Dogs is what made me a fan of Quentin Tarantino. I always loved Pulp Fiction from the first time I saw it. I was a kid. But then years later, watching Reservoir Dogs, like, okay, I need to check out this guy's entire catalog, see what's going on with him.
Yeah, I can't actually remember what the first Tarantino movie was that I watched. I want to say it probably was Pulp Fiction. I remember seeing trailers for Reservoir Dogs in like some of the old VHS movies that I had. And you had the trailers right at the beginning. Yeah. I've seen Reservoir Dogs pop up a couple times here and there. So I was familiar with the movie for a long time from a very young age and knew it existed, but didn't know anything about Quentin Tarantino at the time. I didn't know he was anything special. I want to say somewhere in my early teenage years, I watched Pulp Fiction and then started connecting him with other films that I kind of knew were out there. Like I knew about Jackie Brown, I knew about Kill Bill. Like when the Kill Bill movies were hitting theaters, it was somewhere right around the time I first discovered Tarantino. So I watched that and then watched everything else that he had done up until that.
Gotcha. And something we're going to kind of discuss about each one of his movies is, we kind of joked around in the horror film that he could make. Tarantino has these obvious tropes in all of his movies. And Reservoir Dogs, oddly enough, there's plenty of them, but I guess, where it's his first movie, this is what kind of started a lot of them, except for the feet.
Yeah, there's not really much in the way of females in that cast. Yeah. But, I mean, had there have been a prominent female character in that movie, I'm sure we would have seen her feet.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, like, a scene with, like, Michael Madsen, like, just kicking his feet out the window of a moving car, and we get to see his feet, his toes twinkling around.
I'll take Harvey Keitel's.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Because he probably has nicer feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as for the actual tropes to it, we have, a huge one that I love in Tarantino films is the long shots, the long continuous takes. This is something that is carried out. This is something that's carried through in many of his movies. But if you'll pay attention to his style, in just about every movie, there'll be at least one scene where the camera does not cut.
And you'll follow a character while they're doing something, going into a place or coming out of a place.
And along with the long takes, we have our non-linear scenes, non-linear storytelling. This is
Right.
something more prominent in early Tarantino films,
Mm-hmm.
but it still does take place today, just to a lesser extent.
Mm-hmm.
We have the upward angle trunk shot,
Yep.
and that's something that's in almost every Tarantino film that I can think of. And another big one, the Mexican standoff,
Right.
and something. This isn't. I won't necessarily call this a trope because it's only really in a couple of Tarantino movies that I can think of, but it is a shot of somebody who is just dying, barely holding on to life, and they've been shot, and they're holding the gun on somebody that they've already killed, or like they're just they could be dying there, and they've shot somebody, but then they hold the gun there even longer.
Mm-hmm.
So in this one, for example,
I'm thinking of Mr. Orange.
yeah,
Maybe?
yes,
Okay.
when Tim Roth, after he kills Michael Madsen, he's just holding the gun there,
Mm-hmm.
for an extended amount of time, which his character is a cop. Spoiler.
Yeah.
If
You should have. If you clicked on this
Yeah.
video, you've probably seen these.
if you've not seen Reservoir Dogs by now, then that's on you.
Yeah. If you haven't seen any of these, go
Yeah.
watch them, then come listen to us. Well, something I don't know if you would really call it a trope necessarily, but something that I think makes Tarantino's storytelling interesting is the unexpected. It's always something really unexpected that kind of takes the plot into a different direction or gets things going. Like in Reservoir Dogs, there's not necessarily that. I mean, there's the build up, there's the reveal that Mr. Orange is the cop, but it's a heist movie where you don't see the heist. That in and of itself is unexpected. And then even going into, we'll bring it up more when we get to the other movies, but in almost every Tarantino film, the plot always changes or goes in a new direction or becomes more interesting because of something completely out of the blue.
Yeah. So, moving into Tarantino's second film, we have, of course, what's probably his most popular or most well-known film, Pulp Fiction.
The movie that put him on the map for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that made him the Quentin that made his name for him basically.
Yeah. And, it's the first Tarantino film I ever saw. I don't remember how young I was when I first saw it, but I would know I was young. Too young to really know what's going on in a lot of parts.
Right.
But I was very young the first time I saw it, and I loved it even then.
Mm-hmm.
And once I got older and I started seeing some of it, more of it uncut, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I was missing back then.
I was a little bit of a late bloomer because, like I said, I'm pretty sure that Pulp Fiction was the first one that I watched, but I was in like early high school, I think, when I finally got around to it, and then I caught up afterwards.
I'll say that I was probably about 7 years old when I
Yeah,
first saw
that
Pulp
is
Fiction.
definitely pretty young to be watching Pulp Fiction. But you turned out totally normal, so it's
Yeah,
okay.
that's fine.
Yeah.
So some of the tropes with it, we have the non-linear scenes again. We have that trunk shot, long continuous takes, the introduction of the feet shot.
Yep, Uma Thurman.
Oh yes, Uma Thurman's feet. We'll see plenty more of her feet in later movies.
And again, the unexpected.
Yeah.
I can think of two moments in the movie where the plot totally goes in a new direction because of something completely out of the blue. Like in Mia Wallace's story with Vincent Vega. They're going to go back to her apartment. Maybe they're going to sleep with each other. Maybe they're not. Vincent's
He's going to be loyal.
He's thinking about it though. Yeah. He's thinking about, do I really want to do this? I don't know.
No, it's a test of his loyalty.
And then out of the blue, next thing you know, she's ODing, and then now we're in a totally different world.
Yep.
And then later on, towards the end, when they have Marvin in the back seat.
Yeah, that's the big one right there.
Yeah.
Because that's just a huge storytelling device. I mean, it just draws the plot in an entirely different direction.
Yeah. He hit a bump or something.
Yeah, but it's the funny thing about that is, of course, we're going on the thought that everyone's seen Pulp Fiction by now. Going back to that non-linear storytelling, we see them. The first time you watch it, granted, I was young, so I probably wasn't paying that much attention to it being all over the place. It does make me wonder, like, back then, the first time people watched Pulp Fiction, how confusing it was to them. To, just going through the movie, and more questions come up.
Right.
That you're like, what's going on? Like, what's even happened? Granted, these questions get answered later on.
Right.
But you really wonder, like, what is going on?
I remember the first time I watched it, I could tell that the story was being told out of order, but it was kind of hard to keep track of it, because you see Vincent Vega die, but then he pops back up at the end, and you're like, okay, well, this happens, I guess, right after the beginning, and then you're trying to, like, put a map together in your head of when things happen. Most recent time of watching it in preparation for this review, I didn't find it confusing at all.
No.
Like, the first couple times, it kind of threw me for a loop.
I mean, I've not found it confusing in, well over 10 years now, since I really started paying attention to it.
It's essentially just like a setup for one story, then you get, like, two other stories in the middle, and then you finish the beginning story at the end, essentially.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have the Mexican standoff in there. That's another big Tarantino trope. And then something that kind of started building with Pulp Fiction was the Tarantino Universe. Now, Tarantino likes to use a lot of the same actors over and over.
Right. I think most great directors do.
Yeah,
I
because they find, and there's nothing wrong with that. You find that actor who works well with your material, so of course you're going to keep bringing them back and see what more they can do.
Right, and same crew members too.
Yeah.
I think he used the same editor on the Sally Mink, or I'm not sure how to say her last name, all the way up until she passed away, and then I think Lawrence Bender, is that his name? I know he produced a lot of, like, the first few.
I'm not.
I think maybe even same cinematographer. I mean, like, don't quote us on that, but I know he went back to the same, not just same actors, but this sort of the same stable of crew members too.
Yeah, and of course, this is one of the movies that brought John Travolta's career back to life. Because he hadn't really been doing anything, and he hadn't been in a Tarantino movie since. But it still, it kind of resurrected him. But even though he does reuse the same actors, there is that universe building, because Michael Madsen's character back in Reservoir Dogs of Mr. Blonde, also known as Vic Vega, is actually supposed to be the brother of John Travolta's character in Pulp Fiction, Vincent Vega. Tarantino had actually planned to do a Vega Brothers film that was going to be a prequel.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah. So,
wonder if it would have been like From Dusk Till Dawn. It almost gives me that sort of vibe.
That's kind of how I feel too.
Yeah.
It'd have been something along those lines probably, but it would make stuff very confusing. The fact that it's all one universe, or sometimes some people say it's two Tarantino universes, when you have a lot of the same characters over and over in the same universe, that would get confusing.
Yeah, like, when did what happen exactly?
Yeah, and why is why is Harvey Keitel in this bank heist, getting shot up, and then here in the next movie, he's just this guy.
Everything's fine. Yeah, he's the wolf now.
Yeah, he's very calm, cool, helping them out. I mean, Pulp Fiction it's one of those. It is a timeless movie, and there's so many things about it. We'll get into some more stuff when we actually get into our ratings, but just the characters in this film are iconic alone. I mean, and that's something in almost every Tarantino movie. He knows how to develop characters. He knows how to make them tell the story. And, kind of getting back to Mia Wallace, played by Uma Thurman, getting back to her feat.
Yeah.
There's something just very interesting, the conversation that Jules and Vincent are having at the beginning when they're talking about her. They're talking about her feet. Talking about giving her this
foot massage.
This man giving her a foot massage.
Mm-hmm.
And then not the very first scene you see of her, but one of the very first shots you do see of Mia Wallace is of her feet.
When she's walking around the apartment, right?
Yeah, and you just see her feet. So it's like, okay, there's been this. The only thing you know about her is some guy supposedly gave her a foot massage. And then you see her feet walking in, and you're like, oh, is there going to be something more here? Mm-hmm. And, it kind of builds to that sexual tension. And then, like Raven said, no, that all goes right out the window.
She probably would have gotten a foot massage because Vincent is very proud of his foot massaging technique. He lets us know early on that, it means something. That's what's so cool about him. But then, she ODs, and now we're in a totally different world.
And, there's just so many other interesting little things that you'll pick up over time. Of course, there's the fact that every time Vincent comes out of the bathroom, something bad happens. And one that's a little less noticeable, but I picked up on over the years, is Butch, played by Bruce Willis. Every time he wakes up, he kills somebody.
I hadn't put that together.
Yeah, every time
paid attention to that.
He wakes up from a nap or being knocked out or something, he ends up killing somebody.
That was something totally random with that story too. Like when him and Marcellus are fighting in the street, you think somebody's going to die here, and then they stumble into
the pawn shop.
And then now here we go on this little adventure
Spider
we
caught
didn't
a few
expect.
flies.
That's what makes that movie so fun to watch. Is like you just never. I mean, if you're seeing it for the first time, you're just not expecting it to go in those directions.
Yeah, and
it's fun. And
there's still so much foreshadowing in it too that, like, even though sometimes the plot just goes completely off the rails, there's little hints along the way because, Vincent's talking about the guy keying his Malibu, and saying you don't mess with another man's automobile. Well, then 10 minutes later, he's destroyed the thing. He's wrecked it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the line about what Marcellus Wallace looks like. And, you all know that line. Mm-hmm. Well, later in the movie, he is
that.
Yeah.
At least for a moment.
Yes, that is exactly what is happening to him. He becomes what it's suspected he looks like.
Right.
And even just watching it this last time, there's a couple of things I noticed. And I feel like some of these might have been something I noticed years ago and just forgot about until really studying it. But like when, Mia, she's overdosed on heroin and Vincent's about to give her this adrenaline shot. Mm-hmm. While she's laying on the floor, you see Lance, played by Eric Stoltz, in his messy apartment or his house, there's board games there, and Life and Operation are right there over them.
I didn't notice that. Yeah. I didn't know that at all until you just said it.
And then when Butch is leaving, he's debating on whether to leave Marcellus in the basement to continue being what they're making him. What Zed and Spider are doing to him.
Right.
When he's about to walk out the door, he's talking to a friend or his brother or somebody in Tennessee, where he's from. Mm-hmm. And as he's looking out the door, there's a license plate over his head that says Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And then he looks back toward the basement. Mm-hmm. So it's like, right here is freedom. Tennessee. All you have to do is walk out the door. Mm-hmm. But then he goes back the other way.
I don't think I noticed that.
So, leaving Pulp Fiction behind, next we go on to Tarantino's third film of Jackie Brown. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll be honest, this is a movie for me that's kind of been a little all over the place for me. Like, the first time I watched it, I really enjoyed it. I really did like it. And then that was right after I had watched Reservoir Dogs. So I was in later high school, early college. Mm-hmm. and I liked it. Then a couple of years later went by, and I started watching it again. I didn't really like it as much. Well, then a second time I watched it, and it was kind of the same deal for me. I liked it even less, more so though. And rewatching it for this,
Even less again?
not less. It stayed the same really,
Okay.
but it was like I like the movie, and I want to like it more. But I'll get more into this in the ratings. It's just kind of one of them movies for me that it's not really stood the test of time. I'll get into more of that later. But still, again, none of these are bad movies.
Right.
So don't take that me saying Jackie Brown's not a good movie. Definitely one to watch.
Yeah. I like Jackie Brown, I guess, a bit more than you do. I liked it a lot from the first time I watched it. And I'll say that watching it in preparation for this, I did like it less. Not by a lot, but I liked it a little bit less. Maybe it just doesn't have the same rewatchability as some of these others do. But I always like Jackie Brown just because it's a bit different, which I think is why I also liked Inglourious Basterds a lot too, which we'll talk about when we get to. But it's definitely a sort of a story that's not necessarily something you would expect a Tarantino film to be, if that makes any sense. Yeah. But I always really liked it a lot, kind of for that reason.
And I guess it could be the reason of that it's not technically something he wrote. He adapted it.
That could be part of it. I never quite thought about it in those terms,
yeah.
but that may be. But again, great performances in it.
Oh yeah, and characters are amazing. Even the ones you're meant to hate. I love them.
Oh, I love Wardell.
Yeah, Samuel Jackson, Robert De Niro.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Sam Jackson when we were mentioning Pulp Fiction, but again, that, Tarantino sort of brought his career to life.
Yeah.
And made him an A-lister because of Pulp Fiction, but his performance in Jackie Brown, I don't like the character as much, I don't think, but I still do like the character, and Sam Jackson's always great every time in a Tarantino movie.
Oh yeah, but yeah, great acting, great characters, and very interesting story. Again, it's not something, at least at that time, it wasn't something you were going to expect out of a Tarantino film, but it still follows they call it the early Tarantino trilogy, being that crime drama.
Right. Yeah.
And
he does kind of move away from it.
Yeah. After that.
Yeah.
And of course, it follows has a lot of the same tropes. You get the trunk shot in there. It has the long continuous takes.
Out of sequence storytelling at the end, anyway.
Yeah, that not right there at the very end. The scenes kind of jump back and forth. For the most part, it's fairly linear, but you do get that non-linear toward the end.
And you get the feet. You get Bridget Fonda's feet. Yeah.
And of course, that starts some tension between her and Robert De Niro, and I have to say, that's one of my favorite scenes of Robert De Niro in any movie is toward the end of this, when he just not one word.
Yeah.
But and of course, the Mexican standoff.
At the very end.
Well, shoot, at the beginning too, if you really want to count it, when he first confronts her.
Oh yeah. When he comes into her house, I was thinking at the end when he comes into Max Cherry's
the bail bonds
place
office.
Yeah.
We'll have more to say about Jackie Brown though when we get to the reviews. So moving on from that, we go on to Kill Bill. And again, we are counting Kill Bill as one movie.
We'll talk about them individually, but we are including them in our rankings as one movie and that sort of thing.
So, for those who are confused on that, naturally, Kill Bill was meant to be one movie, but it was so long that they did have to break it up into 2 volumes. Now, that's something we'll really touch more on in the in our rating,
Mm-hmm.
but we both kind of agree Kill Bill 2 is a far better movie than
Right.
the first part.
First film, it's really maybe sort of his love letter to kung fu movies and karate action films like of that type, which is fine. I used to be a big fan of that genre. I haven't watched anything like that in a long time, but it's got, it has all that going for it, and it's enjoyable. But just in terms of the story, it's really just kind of setting things up, and the second movie is, where all the exciting stuff, in my opinion, really happens.
And the characters, I mean, they're the like I said, the main problem with the first one is just it feels like a lot of filler and it's very drug out. But the characters in every one are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really comes to life in the second one, but those in the first are just as great. But once you really see David Carradine get into action, I've thought this for years that Kill Bill Part 2, and we could even include 1, but more so 2, is my favorite David Carradine performance. Like, just
I can agree with that.
he is evil. I mean, he is absolutely evil in this. But when you see that heart come from him with their daughter, it's like, oh, I mean, it really tears you apart on how you're supposed to feel about him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would use the word evil. I mean, you could make that argument, but he's aggressive and he's stern, but he also is like charming and smart, and like at the end you're not really sure how you want to feel about him,
Yeah.
but you want to see him die.
Yeah, and you want to see how it's going to be, but again, when you can hate a character just as you're meant to hate someone, they're a villain, you're supposed to hate them, but if they're supposed to be evil or wicked, whatever way, and they play that to the T, that makes me love the character. Now,
Yeah.
I still, in sense of the movie, I hate that character like I'm supposed to. But I love what they do with the character.
Yeah, and Tarantino's a great writer, and he
Yeah.
usually chooses great actors to play these parts,
Oh, yeah.
and his characters are complex, which makes them interesting whether you like them or not. They're not two-dimensional, and I think that's what makes his characters, and more so his films, stand out, because they are character-driven, really.
And before we move on to the next one, some of the tropes carried on in this one. Once again, we had long, continuous takes. We had non-linear storytelling, definitely, all through
For
the
sure.
movie.
Oh, yeah, all over the place. Lots of flashbacks.
Yeah. We had quite a few trunk shots in it, or just upward angle shots. Multiple feet shot, like I said earlier.
Uma Thurman again, too.
Yeah.
Wiggling the big toe.
Yeah, there's quite just a long sequence on her. And, of course, multiple Mexican standoffs in it.
Right, for sure.
Now, an interesting little fact about this, this movie was actually planned, really, on the set of Pulp Fiction. Uma Thurman and Quentin Tarantino just kind of started talking about this character.
And this is where a lot of fans will kind of connect this multi-layer
Yeah,
universe.
because if you go back to Pulp Fiction, the character of Mia Wallace was in a pilot years ago of this show called Fox Force 5.
By the way, we have a child here, so if you hear some baby cries in the background, it's our kid in the back.
Yeah, that goes for videos in the past as well. But she starts telling this story of this TV show and naming off the characters. They're very reminiscent of those in Kill Bill. So that I would even assume that possibly the idea for Kill Bill came from that part in the script. Maybe Uma Thurman was reading that, like, that could make a really good story.
Yeah.
And because they just came up with the character of the bride together from that. And next, we move on to what Quentin Tarantino himself has called his worst movie.
Right.
Death Proof.
Yeah, still a good movie in its own way.
Yeah.
It has some redeeming qualities.
So, for those that don't know, Death Proof was part of a double feature known as Grindhouse. The other part being Planet Terror by Robert Rodriguez.
Right.
And the first time I ever saw it, I saw it as Grindhouse. So I saw both movies together. I'm pretty sure it was on like just one of the. We had a free movie channel that weekend, and they showed it all together. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. It was kind of odd. And, you know, at that time, I wasn't really as big into some of the grindhouse and exploitation films. And I really do enjoy a lot of them now. But I do love Death Proof for that, you know, pulling off that grindhouse and exploitation style. You know, Tarantino's kind of always hit on exploitation films.
Right.
Before that, especially with Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
Going back to the blaxploitation films.
Which I think, like, he wrote that in, or like he came up with that, the entire idea to do Jackie Brown, I think, for Pam Grier, right? Like, he sort of revitalized her career through that.
Because she was a huge blaxploitation star. And, you know, moving into Death Proof, you know, you still have a lot of that grindhouse drive-in element. And I still think it would be a great movie to see at a drive-in. It has that B-movie quality. But there's some stuff we'll get into in our rating. There is some glaring issues with the movie, in our opinion.
I'll get more in depth when we get to our rankings. But you still got your tropes there. Kurt Russell carries this thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Kurt Russell, great performance. Can't say enough good things about it. And again, this is kind of something that I think stays true of pretty much every Tarantino film. The performances are always good. But yeah, especially Kurt Russell in this one.
And, you know, some of the other tropes hits on. We have multiple feet shot again. You know, it's a very feminine cast here.
Yeah.
A lot of women, so...
Yeah, you got a lot of feet.
Yeah, we're going to get plenty of feet in this one. And then, of course, we get the trunk shot, but this time being from the hood. So still a lot of those same Tarantino tropes carrying over, even though this is a pretty different style film than anything we had seen before or even since.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot of little interesting things in there that make it look like this is something you would have seen back, you know, Grindhouse double feature days.
Yeah, I think it hit the nail on the head with what it was going for. I mean, our opinion of the movie is a little bit different, but I think it did what it set out to do, and you still get the Tarantino tropes that you want to see, which the non-linear storytelling, I don't guess, is there.
No, you do get the long, continuous takes in it, but, you know, it's pretty much 100% linear story in this one, which I guess would be the first Tarantino movie to break that trope.
It might be.
Yeah. Everyone so far has had it,
Yeah, I mean, like Kill Bill, I mean, it's told straightforward, but it does have, like, all those flashbacks that breaks it up, so, yeah. I mean, I don't guess there's not even a flashback in Death Proof, I don't think.
Not that I can think of.
I mean, it's essentially, to me, it feels almost like two movies put together.
It does feel like two separate movies.
Which, well, you know, we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the rankings. But I mean, you can assume that some time has passed in between, in the middle there. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Point A to point B.
So moving on from Death Proof, we have, I think, one of the best Tarantino films ever made, Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah, absolutely love this movie.
Yes.
From the first time I watched it.
Now, I remember when this movie came out, but I did not get to see it for about another, however many years it was. You showed it to me the first time.
Yeah, I remember it was quite a few years later. I watched it when it was first released on DVD.
I want to say it was like 2013 before you ever showed it to me.
Yeah, and I want to say that was when it had come out, 2009, 2010 maybe.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
That was 2009. I know it was still out when I was in high school.
Okay, yeah.
But I just remember you showing it to me. You were only going to show me the first scene.
And that's the thing, that the opening scene of Inglourious Basterds is probably one of my favorite scenes in movie history. Definitely one of my favorite opening scenes of any movie ever.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought it was brilliant. And the acting is like, I think Christoph Waltz's acting in general is just mind blowing in this. It's crazy how good he is in this role.
Once again, it's playing a wicked, wicked man, this Nazi, but you love him as this character.
Yeah.
Because you know he's evil. You hate this man, but he plays it so well.
And sometimes I'll just like turn it on to watch that scene, or I'll show somebody that scene. But every time I turn that movie on, no matter what my intentions are, I'm going to end up every time sitting there watching the entire 2.5
Which is exactly
hours,
what
whatever.
you did. Like you were just going to show me the opening scene, and we sat and watched the entire movie, and like we didn't even move.
No, it's hard to take your eyes off of. It's a very, very enthralling movie. It's just very well done. Acting is great. Writing is great. Everything about it.
I mean, perfect characters and actors. Like it's like I cannot. It's comparable to other Tarantino films, but I can't say a movie that there were better actors. I mean, definitely on par with multiple other ones.
Yeah.
But I mean, just like you said, Christoph Waltz in there, and Brad Pitt is only on screen for maybe 15 minutes at the most.
Maybe. I mean, he's the star of the movie, and he's really, really not in it a lot. And this kind of like goes back to what I was trying to say about Jackie Brown too. It's one of those Tarantino movies that doesn't really feel like a Tarantino movie. I mean, like, the tropes are there, but it feels a bit more serious, a bit more grounded, which I tend to like quite a bit. I think this is a better movie than Jackie Brown.
Oh yeah.
But for those of you that kind of that have seen these, maybe kind of get what I'm trying to say. But
now, I'll also say something about this that I just kind of picked up on this time watching it. You know, the movie is broken up into chapters, like a lot of Tarantino films are.
Which I guess you could say is another trope.
Yeah. But this one, each chapter could be its own short film.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, like you could call this an anthology movie if you really wanted to, because each chapter could be its own short film. The opening scene could be a short film.
Once upon a time in Nazi-occupied France.
Yeah.
And just send that off to Sundance.
Yeah. Then the scene in the basement of the bar. That's another one. Like, that is, like, you do not take your eyes off the screen watching that scene.
Yeah.
And because, this is another big thing with Tarantino films, where you'll have this random conversation going on. Just about anything. It could be about, the Royale with cheese.
Yeah, the characters aren't talking about the plot.
Yeah, you're not, because that's how life is. You're not always talking about the plot. But when you're having these conversations, something's about to happen. And that's how this is. There's that whole scene where they're in the basement playing the game with the cards on their heads.
It is reminiscent, really, of the car scene at the beginning of Pulp Fiction, where they're having all kinds of random conversations, but something is going to happen. I mean, you can put it together. Okay, these guys are on their way to kill somebody. And same thing here.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, there's
people are going to die. In this place.
Which there is a lot of setup. The risk going into the scene, so it's not the same thing. But you can kind of, get lost and just hearing these characters just have these random conversations, and it kind of sets you like in that moment with them, and then of course like, okay, at any minute now they're going to get found out, somebody's going to say the wrong thing, something's going to go wrong here.
So another thing I do really love about this movie, though, is there's a major meta commentary being made by the movie within the movie, Nation's Pride, which is portraying the Nazi propaganda made during World War II. And this character in the movie we're following, he is he's trapped up in a bell tower, and he starts killing off enemy soldiers. Again, this is a Nazi.
Right.
And you get mad watching this because you're like, oh no, like what, why all these Nazis and Hitler is in the audience watching. They're all cheering, laughing at this, this man killing all these Jewish soldiers and other enemy soldiers to them. That's supposed to make you mad. But then once all the Nazis get killed off, yay, we're cheering.
Yeah.
And which, granted, I mean, I don't know of anyone who's going to argue that,
killing Nazis is fine.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who would argue that. But it's still, it is a very interesting commentary being made there. It's like, well, you're going to get mad at someone else doing this, but look what you're doing here. You're cheering, you're cheering on the exact same thing of all this other nationality dying
That is
off.
super meta.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing, like, I want to say the film for that, Nation's Pride, is actually a short film. Like a complete short film.
It is, yeah. I think that's something that they made. Naturally, they made it just for this, but it is its own sort of standalone thing. I mean, you could probably maybe find it on YouTube or something, but I know it's available like as a special feature on the DVD. I think.
Which I own the DVD, but I've never really even taken the time to watch it.
Yeah, I think if you go into the special features, I'm pretty sure you can actually watch Nation's Pride. I mean, it's only like maybe 5 minutes long or something, but.
And some of your Tarantino tropes. We go back to the non-linear storytelling. It does kind of bounce back and forth with that some. We do have the upward angled shot, not from a trunk at this point, but from when they're carving the swastika into the Nazis' heads. And of course, we do have a foot shot in there. The Mexican standoff, a major Mexican standoff, in that one of the greatest ones of all time, I would say, in any film history. And you thought of something that actually kind of begun with this movie.
Yeah, this is the first one that I can think where we see Tarantino sort of change history. Now, I would say this is probably the first of his films that is rooted in any type of real history.
Yeah.
And of course, we have a couple others after Inglourious Basterds, but that's the first one where I think we see Tarantino, if he's going to sort of give us a period piece or a historical drama, he does it the Tarantino way, how he would have written history.
Yeah.
So that, I think, that starts something there.
So next, we go on to Django Unchained. This is one, it's another one for me that is kind of went up and down the rankings for me. This is another one it took me a while to even see. I actually did not get to see this one until about 2015, I think. Quite a few years.
Yeah, that's a few years
after it came out. I knew it was out all that time. I just didn't have access to it. I didn't have streaming services then, and I didn't own it on anything. So finally, I just bought it one day, watched it, and I was like, okay, that's a pretty good movie. Then I'd watch him like, I don't like it as much. Watch it again, I'd like it more.
Yeah.
And it always kind of flip-flopped for me.
It's one for me where, and I love it, and I'll sneak this in there. I think this is probably my favorite soundtrack of all the Tarantino films.
Not mine. I know what mine is, but that's an interesting choice.
That one jumps out there to me. There's quite a few songs that I'll go back and listen to for fun off of that soundtrack. But for me, Django's one that I loved it from the first time that I saw it. I rewatched it a few times when it was still new, and I still like it a lot now. But it's the one where the positives about the movie are very positive, and I love them. But the stuff about the movie I don't like really kind of takes a lot away from me.
And I feel like we're going to have a lot of the same opinions on that, like what those negatives are. There's something I noticed watching it this time, though. I've never picked up on before. So, the actress Zoe Bell, she's been, I want to say, in every Tarantino movie since Death Proof. She has this very strange character in it.
Mm-hmm.
That there is, for some reason, attention brought to her, but she has no speaking line. When they get to Candyland,
Mm-hmm.
you'll just randomly see this woman who has a scarf or something pulled up over her face,
Mm-hmm.
and she has a hat down, and it always shows her eyes, and you could tell it's Zoe Bell just by her eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a scene where she's looking through this. I can't remember what they were called then, but I always called it like an original Viewmaster, where she's looking at the. I can't remember the term for it, but she's looking at the two slides,
Like
the picture.
like a kaleidoscope.
Well, no, it's
something?
like shows actual images,
Oh, okay.
and but she has no speaking role in it. And I don't know what the point of that is. Like, she's just there, and she's this mysterious person
Mm-hmm.
there at the ranch and doesn't do anything.
Right.
I don't know if maybe there was, like, going to be maybe there was scenes cut with her in it. Maybe there was going to be some other story with her. But I just noticed that this time and never picked up on it before.
I could see it maybe just being a cameo thing. Like, she just happened to be available. Maybe Tarantino called her up, like, hey, you want to stand in for this scene? Just...
Yeah, but, like, it calls blatant attention to her.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Maybe to make it obvious that it's a cameo or
Yeah.
something. I'm not sure.
I don't know. It's just like I wish I knew what's the deal here. Like, why are you showing her like only on her? The camera's only on her for like 10 seconds at a time, and never speaking.
Right.
It's like,
I do not know.
What is the purpose of this here?
And I'll say again, performances in this movie, great.
Absolutely.
Christoph Waltz, it's a step down from Inglourious Basterds a little bit. Maybe I just like seeing him play a villain, but I do like him in this. But
I do. I love him in this.
seeing DiCaprio in a Tarantino movie was great. Like, DiCaprio is one of my favorite modern actors, anyways.
And see, and I'm just the opposite. I've never liked DiCaprio, and before this, I couldn't stand him.
Wow.
Watching him in this is actually what made me start to respect him as an actor, because, you know, when he smashes his hand down the table, in real life, he cut his hand wide open.
And just acts right.
Yeah, he goes right through the rest of the scene.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I really do respect that. I never liked him before that, and even to this day, I'm still not a huge fan of him.
He did a lot of great work around that time,
Yeah.
too. Because I think Wolf of Wall Street was not long after
Yeah.
that, and like the 2010s, DiCaprio did amazing work.
Yeah, and I have really gained respect for him since that. So like I can actually watch him in stuff since then. His stuff before it, I still don't care a thing in the world to see. You know, but like seeing him in that, Wolf of Wall Street, The Aviator, I thought those were all very
Right.
great roles.
And for Jamie Foxx, great in this one. I like Jamie Foxx anyway.
Yeah.
And seeing him do a more serious role, because a lot of the stuff with Jamie Foxx before I'd seen him in had been mostly like comedy,
Yeah.
I think. But seeing him do a serious role, I mean, he's good in this. Everybody in this is good. Performances are always good in
Yeah,
Tarantino.
even just like the little one-off characters in it too, who might not be on screen for maybe, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Everyone in this film does an amazing job. The acting, and Samuel Jackson.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love Sam Jackson.
Yeah,
in
it's
this.
just
I don't think you see him enough. Almost. Yeah. I think it's like maybe the last half of the movie that he's really there, but he's the most. He's Sam Jackson turned up to 11.
And there's not a lot of the Tarantino tropes in this movie either. There's
Possibly because it's a period piece.
Yeah, now there's very few nonlinear scenes, but I mean it is very few, which is really just flashbacks. That's really all it is.
Right.
And then our big Mexican standoff at the end.
Yeah.
But again, we'll get into more of this when we do the ratings. But I know one thing that kind of really takes a hit on this movie is the fact that the movie feels like it should have ended.
With the big gunfight.
Yeah, right when Christoph Waltz dies, right after that huge gunfight.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the climax of the movie, but then there's still like a whole another 20 minutes left, and like,
Yeah,
what's going on?
that's kind of one of the things where, as much as I love this movie, there's a few things about it that knock it down for me, and again, we'll be more specific when we get to the ratings, but that's one that I'll say too. Like, you have that big gunfight right there, and it feels like if it's gonna go on further, you almost have to top that. The ending needs to be a bit more explosive than it really turns out to be,
Yeah.
and it's just, to me, it just kind of ends on that note where it's like, it felt like the movie kind of already ended a little
Yeah.
bit. And you get that great montage too, like when he finally frees himself because he tricks I don't know their name, the mining company
miners,
guys,
yeah.
Tarantino's
Yeah,
there,
Tarantino.
and he rides off, and you get John Legend's music playing, and it's like, okay, here we go, the hero's riding back into battle, and then it's just kind of, he just sort of shows up and
Yeah.
kills him, and that's all.
Yeah, just a very subpar ending at that.
Yeah, but again, Tarantino rewriting history there too. He said that he made this movie because he wanted to give, Black Americans that folk hero that he didn't feel that they had. And of course, like, this is a period piece, slavery times, like, you might not have had a real life character like that, but now Tarantino's rewriting history, so you do.
Yeah, and there's a funny feeling about this movie is that, it has the feeling of a Western, but it all takes place in the East. Like, it's in the South and East.
Yeah. I guess because maybe the East at that time probably felt enough like the Wild West that you could kind of go with it.
And there's one, this is a random little nitpick, though. There's something that irritates me about this movie. So, we're here in southwestern Virginia, not far from Tennessee. And the one scene in the movie where they're supposed to be around Gatlinburg, it is, okay, Gatlinburg is right at the heart of the Smoky Mountains. This scene, you would tell 100% is shot in California. And, like, almost in the middle of the desert. I mean, there's hardly any mountain, any terrain there. I'm like, yeah, this is, like,
Yeah.
at least act like you've been there. Okay, now moving on to Tarantino's 8th film, appropriately named Hateful Eight.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to go on record to say, I know a lot of people and a lot of lists put this movie dead last. I do not in the slightest bit. Now, it's not in my top few. It's not one of my favorites.
Right.
But I absolutely love this movie.
Yeah, it's a 3-hour movie, but it doesn't feel like 3
No,
hours.
not at all.
Which you can say this about a few of these, but I think it's an enjoyable watch. I mean, it's not my favorite. It's not going to be towards the top of my list, but it's enjoyable nonetheless. I like it for, it's a Western, but it's not like a typical Western. It's snowy, and they're stuck in this little inn the entire time. But I like stories like that. I like lockdown, claustrophobic.
It's just like Reservoir Dogs.
Exactly like Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah. You're looking for the rat, so to say.
Yeah, and it's more like intimate, between the characters and everything. So, not a lot of bad things to say about this one either.
Yeah, and it's not even, like, I've kind of called it this before, where you say it's not your traditional Western. It takes place in the West, but this is more so like a traveling play that you would have seen in that period, that would have gone to opera houses, playhouses.
That's an interesting point.
In that post-Civil War period.
I think this entire movie could be a
Yeah,
stage play.
yeah,
really.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's actually how he kind of promoted this when it came out, as a road show. Like, there were certain theaters around the country you could watch this on film, and they'd have the soundtrack playing separately with it, and it was just like you were watching a stage show.
Interesting tidbit about the music for this. This is a little bit of trivia. Somebody might have to fact check me on this, but I'm pretty sure there was music used for this movie that was originally written for, I want to say, John Carpenter's The Thing.
I believe that's
But
right.
it wasn't used, and Tarantino got the rights to that music and used it here. Fact check me on that, but I think that's actually true.
Which, you could say the same thing about Reservoir Dogs. both of these movies are kind of based on The Thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the people here is not what...
somebody's not who they say they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I love about this. It's in a much different setting. Still in the cold, much like The Thing. They're in the snow and the ice. But, like you said, this is not your typical Western feeling movie. The opening sequence of this movie is one of my favorite shots. I mean, the cinematography in any of Tarantino's works, and it doesn't look anything like a Tarantino movie. When it first opens up and you're seeing there's like a cross, I believe, Jesus on it.
And you see the wagon.
Yeah, it's getting covered in the snow. And just all through these mountains, like, this looks nothing like anything Tarantino's ever brought out.
I mean, the beautiful landscape shots. I mean, it does a very good job of setting the tone right from the get-go and giving you that very cold, isolated feeling.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite cinematography in any Tarantino movie, all throughout it. And
I can see that. It might be a tie for me.
It is actually kind of a tie for me as well. But at least at the time it came out, I know it was my favorite. But there's little things here and there that I picked up on this time. Never really noticed before. This is only the second time I'd actually watched it when I rewatched it for this. Throughout the movie, those who might be amateur filmmakers or you just study a lot of film, light sources are a big thing. That your light source needs to be known. Like, say you're in a house or in a cabin or something, there's an orange glow on people. You need to show that there's a fireplace or a fire burning to show what that light's coming from.
Motivated lighting.
Yeah. In this, though, all throughout the movie, there'll be certain spots where it's just a random beam of light shining down. It could be inside the stagecoach, inside Minnie's haberdashery, where the majority of this takes place. But it will be just one single light shining down on just random objects. In the stagecoach, it shines on the Lincoln letter, which is a big storytelling device in this.
Right.
It shines on that, and then I want to say it shines on the coffee pot at one point.
I think you're right. Now this one is not as fresh in my memory as some of these other ones are. I haven't watched this one super recently, but that's something I never paid attention to or really noticed. But I mean, I think you are right. I have vague memories of seeing like sort of a beam of light.
Yeah.
And I guess you're left to assume that maybe it's sunlight coming through a window, but I think even at nighttime.
Yeah, it's at night, and it will be like during the midst of this blizzard. So like there's going to be no light coming in from anywhere. And like where is this supposed to be coming from? And why is it there? Because it's very reminiscent of, back to Pulp Fiction, the briefcase. There's this glowing light come out of it, which, I think...
Marcellus Wallace's soul.
Yeah, there's all kind of theories for that back then. And someone asked Tarantino, and my favorite answer was what he just said, there was a light bulb in it. That's why it shined.
Which I'm sure what the real answer is.
Yeah, just a light bulb and a battery pack in there.
Yeah.
But, I know that's kind of a lesser used little trope in Tarantino films. But it's one that I just thought was very interesting for this one. And there's really not a lot of the Tarantino tropes in this one. I know there is the trunk shot that's coming out from the shed door outside, and then you have a few non-linear scenes. It's
the first half of the movie is sort of its own little story,
and then it goes back,
in time, tells you how we got to this point, and then picks up again.
Yeah. So
it's there.
Yeah, it's not as extreme as in some of the earlier films, but it is there, and there are a few long takes, the long continuous takes, but they're a lot shorter than in his earlier films. And I guess that actually, kind of helps the fact that it is a 3-hour movie.
Right.
You don't want a lot of long takes. That could make it seem a little more boring.
And I can't think of too many. The only one that immediately comes to mind is I think you see Tim Roth and Bruce Dern sitting in the chair, and it's when they first arrive, and they're telling him to shut the door, and that whole little thing goes on for a second.
Yeah, and because it's that long shot.
Yeah.
Where they're in the foreground, but all the action at the door is going on way in the background. And one thing really, that still kind of sticks with me about this movie was the guitar.
Yeah, I was thinking about bringing that up.
Yeah, like that. As guitarists, that really hurt. To those who don't know the story, there's a scene where Kurt Russell smashes this guitar, and it was a priceless Martin period guitar. Came from just after the Civil War, and
they had a stunt guitar that he was meant to actually pick up and break.
Supposed to cut the shot, and they'd switch out for the prop guitar.
And he smashed the real relic.
Yeah, thinking that it was like
the prop.
Yeah, he didn't know apparently.
And it's funny, and it cuts like immediately right there. And then if you watch that back, he picks the guitar up and he's right just in the middle of going to smash it, and Jennifer Jason Leigh just goes no.
Yeah, and she looks
and it
right.
Cuts like right.
She looks right off camera.
Yeah.
Like she screams like whoa, and looks off camera.
Yeah.
Like telling she knew that was not supposed to happen.
Yeah, that was a genuine performance right there in that moment.
And
you could tell.
That caused them a lot of flack for that movie. And but it happened. You can't really change it now. It hurts, but
and you got to use that take.
Yeah,
too.
Exactly. There's no way you can get around it.
Yeah.
And finally, that brings us to Tarantino's final film so far, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
The freshest in our mind.
Yeah, we just rewatched this tonight. This was actually only my 4th time seeing it, but this is the first movie that I ever saw in theaters alone. Like, I was sitting alone in the theater, had no one with me. There were other people there.
Mine was The Dark Knight.
Okay.
All those years ago.
But I just sat there watching this, and I'm like, I was kind of irritated at first, because like, I have to go to this alone now. But I really liked it, because I'm glad I went. Because if there's one negative I'll have about this movie, it does not have the same effect watching it on TV. Like, when you're watching it on a TV screen, it does not have the same impact as it did watching it in the theater.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought about that.
Now, I have never seen another Tarantino movie in theaters. So, so I'm curious if that would have been the same thing for me for those.
Possibly. I have only seen one other Tarantino film in theaters, I think. I know I've seen Hateful Eight in theaters. I'm trying to think if there was one more. I don't think so. I think Hateful Eight and this are the only two I've seen in theaters, actually.
Yeah, because this is a movie, it was a spectacle to see in the theater. Now, when I said that Hateful Eight was my favorite cinematography, this would be the top. Yeah, because there's those scenes of driving through 1969 Hollywood, in modern day.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful, just absolutely beautiful cinematography.
The undertaking this must have been. I mean, when you're just sitting there just watching, I mean, just such a mild thing, like a character driving around, which there's a lot of. You'll get a lot of shots like from inside the car or outside the car, following someone driving, and just to see this whole 1960s world that they had to have shut down so many streets, and all the set design that must have taken. It truly is like so cool to see.
And what other filmmaker out there today could just say, yeah, I'm going to shut down half of Hollywood for this one scene that serves absolutely no purpose to the movie?
Yeah.
It's literally just a scene of Brad Pitt driving around.
Yeah. Or it serves a purpose for the movie. It doesn't serve a purpose for
the story.
Which is, there's not much of one. But
yeah, and that's a very interesting thing about this movie. there really is no plot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's telling the story of Rick Dalton, this, washed up actor who's, he feels like his heyday is gone. He's just looking for one more big break to, send him back into the spotlight. And it's it makes it feel kind of self-aware. Like maybe that's what was going on with DiCaprio at that time.
Yeah, or maybe could we say even Tarantino himself?
And
Maybe.
very well.
I mean, who knows? Who
Yeah,
knows?
I mean, there's so many little, hints to the real world in this. And naturally, this movie was a love letter to the golden age of Hollywood.
Yeah, and that's essentially what this movie is.
Yeah.
And I think if you know that going into it, you can appreciate it a lot more for that. Because, like we've said, there's not really much of a plot. But you're going into this, okay, number one, knowing that it's a love letter. And, of course, there's the Charles Manson stuff and the Helter Skelter story, which it sets it up enough. And you see it in the trailers anyway. You know that plays a part in the story here.
Which, when it first came out, they were talking about this movie is going to be about the Manson family.
That's what I first heard.
Yeah.
Once I seen the trailer, I was like, okay, that's not what I was expecting at all. But when I first started hearing the rumors of it, I thought that's essentially what it was going to be Tarantino's take on the Helter Skelter story. But that is just such a small, minute part of this. I mean, it plays its part and it builds up to that, but it's not about that, And it's about Rick and it's about Cliff.
Yeah.
But there's even not much of a story there. And really, Sharon Tate's character, at least within the movie, kind of ends up being useless to some extent. I mean, she really does nothing the entire movie, but because she's Sharon Tate and we know the history, she's there. And I think a lot of this was really, Tarantino knowing what he's going to do at the end of the movie, going back to that trope of rewriting history and showing things his way.
Definitely subvert your expectations through this whole movie.
Exactly, and that's really why I think she's ultimately there. And of course, he pays homage to her too.
Yeah.
So I mean, she serves her purpose in the movie, but she has like no real bearing on the plot. I would say like what thin plot there is. But like I said, we're not burying this thing like. It's not that it has no story at all. I mean, there are characters that go through changes. Rick Dalton especially, and even to a degree Cliff, you could say.
Yeah.
But this movie is essentially, like we've said a million times, it's a love letter to the golden age of Hollywood. This movie looks like 1969, and it's a 3-hour-long movie, but to me it doesn't feel like it. I know a lot of people think that it feels a bit too long. I've heard a lot of people criticize that it drags a little bit throughout the middle.
Not at all.
Not for me. I just have an incredibly fun time watching the movie. I can just sit there and watch this like, okay, I'm in 1969, and I just have a blast.
As we talked about him rewriting World War II history, this is how things would have went if he was in charge. That's one of the great things about this movie is like, there have been many films made about the Manson family. Not really movies, but there's been documentaries, plenty of stuff.
Yeah, well, there's been a few movies.
Yeah.
I can't think of any like really major ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen a few out there. I mean, there's one from the 70s called Helter Skelter, and then there's a few of them. But I mean, we all know the story about it.
Yeah, but here's the thing: I've known so many people who have almost like idolized Charles Manson, and just like I'm thinking, what is your deal?
Yeah.
Like, really, what is wrong with you? Like, this was a sick man. And that's what I love about this movie, that Tarantino is not afraid to just, like, he's not bringing any glory to them,
Right.
not showing them in any positive light, and he's not even showing them in this just dark, gothic, macabre light.
You're not even scared of them.
No, he makes them a joke.
Yeah, they are incredibly silly characters, and nobody else in the film is afraid of them at all.
And he takes away all their power because the famous quote of "I'm the devil here to do the devil's business."
It's like, no, it was dumber.
Yeah,
than
no,
that.
something
Like
dumber than that.
Rex or something.
Yeah, and so instantly takes away all of their power.
Yeah.
And it's a very sweet, it's a very bittersweet ending because we know what happened to Sharon Tate,
Right.
but it's very beautiful in a way that through this movie in the Tarantino universe, she lives on.
Yeah. In a perfect world, this is the story we
Yeah.
would have been told.
Yeah, and Rick Dalton went on to do great things after this. He wasn't a washed up
Right.
actor anymore.
Yeah. Like we don't know he never. I mean, he never became an A-lister necessarily, but he was satisfied with his work, and he did more things. He knew he wasn't washed up. He knew he was capable, and he proved himself to himself, which that essentially is the story of this movie.
And in a way, with the end of this movie, the golden age of Hollywood never had to die, really, because this is a perfect world. So things went on exactly as they had been.
Yeah, and the storybook sense.
Yeah.
Like hence the Once Upon a Time at the end.
Yeah.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
And there's one scene in it that I truly love toward the end. It's going right into the third act, where it's showing all the neon signs lighting up. Now, if you've seen my other videos, my other shows on the channel before, I've mentioned that I am kind of a nerd when it comes to neon. I used to work in a neon sign factory, and there's something just so beautiful and nostalgic about neon signs and the artwork that goes into them. It's a product of another era, really. And when you see all these neon signs lighting up in this scene, it's almost symbolizing this is the death of an era. Like it's fading away, and at this time you still think, okay, it's leading up to Sharon Tate's about to die.
Yeah, the first time I watched this movie, that's what I was waiting for.
Yeah, I mean,
I
guess everyone is.
At some point in time, the Manson family is going to play into this bigger story here, and they're set up along the way, and we see the dates popping up from time to time, and you're kind of thinking, all right, the real story happened then, and we know we're leading up to that. You're going to get that scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just it's a false foreshadowing, and like you think, okay, this is just like there's an era here about to die. Like there's just a whole time frame of Hollywood that's about to go away.
And in real life, the Manson murders really did shake up Hollywood a lot. I mean, it was the biggest story at the time. I mean, it for better or worse, made superstars out of the people that committed these crimes.
Yeah.
And
which is a horrible thing to
Yeah.
think about. But, that's what I love about it, that Tarantino takes that away from him, gives the spotlight back to the actual celebrities.
Yeah.
The people who were, people were looking up to and watching night after night, week after week on TV and in the movies. And there's some just, little things in this movie that I've noticed time to time. The multiple aspect ratios throughout it. Like when it shows, it will go to the 3x4, or it kind of even looks like 1x1. The old CRT TV ratio when it's showing
the Bounty Law episodes.
It's showing these old TV episodes, and there's a couple other shots in it where we'll do this too. And it's like you're watching multiple. The first time I saw it, I thought I was going to get confused because I'm like, they're going to start showing all these fictional TV shows him in there, and I like it because it looks like they're about to go into full episodes of some of these things.
Yeah.
And they never really do that until you're watching him film this pilot. And that alone looks like its own movie.
It really does, and I would watch that movie.
Yeah. I mean, that is, and I will say, I think that's, to this day, the best acting from DiCaprio and even Brad Pitt.
Yeah, and I said this early on, before he even seen the movie, I remember telling him this, like, you can watch this for DiCaprio and Brad Pitt's performances alone. This is definitely up there in my favorite of DiCaprio's performances for sure, and I'd even say Brad Pitt.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, these guys are awesome to watch in this. You totally buy them as best friends. You buy them for what they are. they're great.
And there's a lot of stuff about this movie that you kind of just have to be in the know on.
You really do. The movie does expect you to know a lot of things going in.
Yeah.
And you really, in order to kind of get what it's doing, you really do need to be familiar with the Manson family story a little bit. You got to have a little bit of knowledge of movies from that era to some extent. I mean,
and celebrities.
And certain celebrities, yeah. It kind of I mean, this is a movie, I think if you're not a film lover, you're just not going to care about it. You might be bored. So I can't necessarily say that I would recommend it to everyone. But if you're a film lover, especially like films of this era, like I think you're going to have a blast with it.
Yeah. And some of those things, it's helpful to know. Like I said, you want to know some of these celebrities that are there, some of the TV shows, movies that were out at the time. Mm-hmm. Like you said, you need to know something about the Manson family. Mm-hmm. And there's other stuff you can go into without knowing anything about. Like a lot of people don't realize this was kind of based on the dynamic between Burt Reynolds and his stuntman. Mm-hmm. They were very close friends. Then there's this little side plot that comes up time to time that, Brad Pitt's character killed his wife while they were out on a boat at sea. Just so happens her name is Natalie. And, so you kind of have to know what that's about. And, it's fun little nods to stuff.
Yeah.
And, little bits about Bruce Lee.
I was going to bring up the Bruce Lee scene. Yeah, you kind of got to know. First of all, you have to know that it's Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Because, the movie doesn't tell you, I don't think.
I think they just say Bruce.
I think they might say
Bruce.
Well,
yeah, they say they're on Green. And
Green Hornet, okay,
they're on the set of the Green Hornet, so you have to know Bruce Lee was on Green Hornet.
Yeah, and you have to be familiar with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this movie's full of little inside nods and inside jokes. You got to be like not necessarily a student of film, but you kind of got to be a movie lover to really have a good time with this, I think. But we are, so we love it.
And there's something kind of random in it that I remember noticing the first time I watched it. Didn't the last two times, but I noticed it again tonight. So there's this scene, which again, this is another amazing scene, because Tarantino shoots everything on film still. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene where Leonardo DiCaprio is put right into The Great Escape instead of Steve McQueen. Mm-hmm. And that alone is just beautiful, work right there. It's kind of, I guess they've done a green screen.
Yeah, I would imagine
like Forrest Gump was done.
Yeah, I would imagine it had to have been some sort of a green screen scenario for that.
But right before that, when DiCaprio is talking, it does it 3 times, like it does a quick cut. Mm-hmm. 3 different times, like right in a row. Like it'll cut to the next scene, cut to the next, or not the next scene, but just another shot.
Like a jump cut.
Yeah, and it's all in the same. The camera's in the same spot though.
Yeah.
But it's just, you can tell it's an obvious jump cut 3 times.
I noticed that a lot. There's quite a lot of jump cuts throughout this.
See, and that's the only place I noticed it like that though in this whole movie.
I noticed it a couple other times. I noticed it when Rick Dalton's on the set of the pilot that they're shooting, and Timothy Olyphant's character.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's
okay,
right there.
Okay, so there's that, and then there was another time when you first see, I guess the only time you see Cliff drive back to his house in Van Nuys, because I think it's in Van Nuys. There was the Van Nuys sign out there. When he's making the macaroni, there's jump cuts when he's like moving around his house.
I didn't pick it up right there. Mm-hmm. But I know in Death Proof they've done this too, but that was to simulate glitches in the film. Because these were the old Grindhouse movies. They were very cheaply made. So there are these little glitches here and there. You'd see this at the drive-in. Mm-hmm. That's what the effect was for there. I don't quite get what the effect was for in this.
I don't know either. Jump cuts are typically recognized in the film world as something you don't want to do. And, when you do put them in there, like it's typically for some sort of reason.
Yeah.
You're sending some sort of a message, and I'm
so there's obviously one here. But
yeah, there would have to be some reason to do it. And and I'm with you. I guess I don't exactly know what it would be, but like in those two places especially, I noticed them.
And then to touch on the Tarantino tropes that this hits on, we do have a few of the very long takes in there. We have our feet shot, plenty of them, dirty hippie feet usually.
Yeah, you get dirty hippie feet, but you also get Margot Robbie feet.
Yeah, which hers are still kind of dirty because she's walking around in sandals and barefoot.
Yeah. Well, there's the shot of her in bed sleeping.
Yeah.
And like as soon as we cut to that, the first thing you see is her feet
Yeah.
laying on the bed, and of course you pan up to show it's her. Yeah.
And we do have another huge Mexican standoff at the end.
Yeah, a funny Mexican standoff. You know, we got old Rex here.
Yeah.
Talking to Cliff, and one of them's got the real gun, and then Cliff with the acid dipped cigarette, just pointing it back at him. Yeah.
Yeah, talking about doing his devil stuff.
Yeah, so devil shit or something. Yeah.
But definitely, this would be the only movie I'd say some people might not have seen yet, being that this new.
Mm-hmm.
But it's 2 years old at this point, so it's not new.
Yeah. Again, even though we're spoiling these, watch these anyway if you haven't seen them. I mean, Tarantino movies they're all good. We're gonna rank them, and I know we've kind of said some negative stuff, and we'll still say some negative stuff when we get to our rankings. But not one of these is a bad movie.
No. Highly recommend every one of these movies we've talked about so far. Now, I know this has been kind of a long review up to this point, hitting on his entire catalog. This might be split into 2 parts, but we're about to get into our ratings right now.